Wonderful. Thank you. All righty. Okay, city planning, DNA lab. All right. So the time now is 4 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order. Happy spring. Welcome to today's Board meeting being conducted via WebEx video conference platform. There are 5 items on today's meeting agenda. This meeting is being held virtually and recorded to comply with public law and transparency. It'll be available for viewing at Borough President Adams 1 Brooklyn YouTube channel. Tonight on the agenda, we have a presentation by the New York City Department of City Planning regarding zoning for accessibility text amendment proposal. We have a second item by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory from DNA Learning Center regarding a 2021 summer camp. And our last presenter would then be New York City Campaign Finance Board on ranked choice voted in Brooklyn. Then we're going to go into unfinished business, new business, and then close out. While the room is getting full, so we're able to go over our minutes, we're going to skip over to our second item on the agenda, which will be a presentation by the New York City Department of City Planning regarding its zoning, accessibility, and text amendment proposal. Before that, I'd like to introduce our colleagues who are here supporting us with technical support for the board meeting. We have David Perez. Calling the roll tonight is Michelle Crutchfield, who will be helped with assistance with attendance. And let me see if we have anyone else on. I just want to check, did I miss anyone? Yeah. And those are the members from the Borough Hall team that is on for this evening. Representatives from New York City Department of City Planning are here this afternoon to present a collaborative plan from the Department of City Planning, the Mayor's Office of Persons with Disabilities, the MTA, and the New York City Council. This intended special zoning regulation that would introduce consideration of the access easement of properties under consideration for development adjacent to a transit station, with result benefit pertaining to adjustment of standard zoning requirements, expanding numbers of stations that will be beneficial for eligible transit improvement, including accessibility, and expand geographic of linked properties in high density areas that will be eligible for discretionary floor area bonus. These actions are envisioned as a technique to enable the speeding up of the implementation of station accessibility. The proposed zoning text amendment is being presented tonight, right? It's being presented by the Department of City Planning. I'm going to introduce Angela Bellaiso from the Department of, did I get that correct?
Bellaiso, yeah.
Bellaiso, Angela Bellaiso for the record. I'm going to introduce her from the Department of City Planning, correct? Or are you transit?
City Planning. Yeah.
City Planning, so I want to make sure it's here. Department of City Planning, okay? So I'm going to have you take the floor. You can introduce your members of your team. I'd like to also introduce from the MTA, Howard Levine from Government and Community Relations, who will be presenting with her. And this is a dual presentation. They'll be switching off their screens, and we'll turn the floor over to you. Please introduce yourself, state your name and title for the record, and the members of your team. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Angela Bellaiso. I'm the project lead for the Department of City Planning. I'm in the Transportation Division here. Joining me from City Planning is Chris Lee, our Zoning Division lead, and Alex Summer from our Brooklyn office, as well as Josh Vogel and Amy Jin. I believe that is all of us from the Department of City Planning. And I'm joined by Howie Levine from the MTA. I'll have him introduce the MTA team.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Angela. So as Angela mentioned, my name is Howie Levine. I'm from the MTA Department of Government and Community Relations. I'm joined tonight by a few other people from my team, Andy Inglesby, who I imagine many of you are familiar with, our Brooklyn representative, Luke DePalma, both from our government and community relations team, as well as Rachel Cohen from our system-wide accessibility office, and Moonsun Park, who is our project manager from the MTA's transit-oriented development group. And with that, I think, Moonsun, you were going to share your screen. Do you have access to do that?
I do not yet have access. My share button is not, it's still grayed out. Can someone give me access?
You have been granted presentation access.
I do not have access. Sorry, I don't have access, unfortunately. It's not,
It looks like I have access, Moonsun. Do you want me to share the slides?
that would be great. Thanks, Josh.
Also on the line, we have Richard Barrick from our office, Director of Land Use. So for this presentation. Okay, you can proceed. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to, just to give a little bit of run of show, I'm going to kick off the first part of this presentation, then hand it over to Angela for DCP to run through more of the specifics, and then we'll take any questions. Without further ado, we can head to the next slide, or Josh. So just to quickly, in one sentence, I think you kind of kick this off the top. We're here because the MTA and Department of City Planning are proposing a citywide zoning text amendment that's going to allow the MTA to work more efficiently with private developers and help achieve system-wide accessibility across the transit system much more quickly. This proposal includes two parts. First is a system-wide transit easement requirement, and the second is an expanded transit improvement bonus in high-density areas. And we're going to talk about both of those in more detail. Just some brief background. I think many people will be familiar. MTA stations are extremely old. A little more than a quarter of all subway and Staten Island railway stations are accessible. And 25 out of 39 of the commuter railroad stations are accessible within city limits. And so we're here today to, help improve that number through this tool. And of course, when we talk about accessible stations, we're specifically, this initiative focuses on vertical accessibility. Next slide, please, Josh. So the numbers I mentioned before were a long way towards a fully accessible system. And, many New Yorkers would benefit and really need fully accessible stations. People with disabilities, parents with young children who are using strollers, or growing senior population, growing at nearly twice the rate as the general population, and people with temporary injuries for whom, for these communities, a subway ride that in some cases should just take minutes can take hours, be very circuitous. Not to mention just that elevators at stations can benefit anyone who, for whatever reason, would be better off using an elevator on that given day, on that given trip, than the stairs. Next slide, please. So the MTA has made a historic commitment to invest in accessible stations. In our current capital plan, we've invested over $5 billion to make 77 stations vertically accessible. That would be 43% of all New York City transit stations, the subway stations, and 60% of all ridership would be using fully accessible stations. Additionally, no subway rider would be more than 2 stations away from an accessible station when all of these projects in our capital program are complete. And this initiative that we're talking about today is building on top of this historic commitment that will continue, and it's another tool to help complement this capital program to make these stations accessible more quickly and allow us to make more stations accessible. Next slide, please, Josh. Back one. Thank you. So, even with our historic funding commitment to accessibility, elevator construction is extremely challenging. There's a few examples here on the right of our narrow platforms, narrow sidewalks, limited entry and exit passages, decades of highly complex utility infrastructure underground that we need to relocate whenever we are digging, even for an elevated elevator, or an elevator to an elevated station, excuse me. And then on the top right, you see the picture of a lot of limited clearance between buildings and station, particularly at our elevated stations in Brooklyn. We have very small spaces between the buildings and the stations that make adding an elevator extremely difficult without the tools we're going to talk more about today. And then lastly, just that, as many of you know, most stations require multiple elevators to be made fully accessible, which is an even bigger process than just building one. Next slide. And so zoning right now does support our efforts to make stations accessible. On the right here is an example of an easement at the 28th Street station in Manhattan. This easement allowed us to add an elevator and a staircase and bring them off of the sidewalk, improving the environment of those narrow sidewalks. The zoning overall helps us align private development with improved station accessibility and allows us to make more direct accessible routes, less circuitous trips through stations, and also to speed up, as I've mentioned, the delivery of these accessibility and transit improvements across the city. But there are limitations, and so this slide talks about our easement provision. So an easement provision, which exists in very limited areas across the city, is a requirement that if you're building adjacent to an MTA station, you talk to the MTA, you consult with us, and if we need space in your building to add an entrance or elevator or any form of access improvement to the station, we'll work together with the developer to set that space aside so the MTA can come in later and build that improvement. So on the right here is an example from the 4th Avenue and 9th Street station in Park Slope, where you can see very clearly that elevated platform there and this new development going up right there that does not have an easement because we do not have the ability to talk with the developer in that way I just outlined right now. And you can just see this outlined box where we could have very easily added an elevator right from the street to the platform. That unfortunately is a real missed opportunity for us. We have these, of course, across the whole borough. So right now, this tool exists, but as I mentioned, very limited areas of the city. There's no general framework for facilitating outside of these very limited areas, mostly along the 2nd Avenue subway corridor in Manhattan and in the special zoning district in Inwood and far upper Manhattan is where they exist right now. And so as I mentioned, a number of missed opportunities, particularly at our complex stations like this one. Next slide, please, Josh. And so with the transit bonus mechanisms, what that is an incentive program that is voluntary and grants additional floor area, it's often called a bonus, for significant station improvements that the developer will make themselves, like elevators, entrances, and this is only in high density areas of the city. And so similarly to the easement provision, it's only available in the very highest density parts of the city, very limited. You can see on the image on the right here where those stations are across those are all the stations, the entire city. There are a number of them in downtown Brooklyn, but those are the only ones in the whole borough right now. They're only available to sites that are adjacent to the station, right next to the station. And the current application process for using a bonus and applying for a bonus successfully is extremely long. And as a result, it adds a lot of risk to a development. As a result, we have very few of these benefits that have ever been built, even as this program has been on the books for a number of decades. Next slide, please, Josh. So all of that brings us to why we're here, which is the zoning for accessibility proposal, which is a citywide zoning framework that will create many more opportunities to increase accessibility in our transit system across the entire city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela from DCP to take us through more of the details on how this will impact Brooklyn specifically and just more of the granular details of it.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Howie. Josh, can you go to the next slide? Well, there's supposed to be a map here. I apologize for the snafu. So the applicability of the easement in Brooklyn affects all but 3 stations. So, you know, you guys can picture a map of Brooklyn in your head, and the 3 stations where the easement would not apply are Neck Road and Fort Hamilton Parkway and Grant Avenue. And that is because they are surrounded by sort of very low density residential or commercial uses. We can jump to the next slide and talk about the transit bonuses, because the transit bonus in Brooklyn only apply in downtown Brooklyn, where there is currently a transit bonus in place. The blue stations here are where there is an existing transit bonus program. Our proposal would also add the stations that are in pink on this map. And additionally would allow more properties within this CBD and more properties around the pink stations to be able to apply for the bonus. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about the actual specifics of the proposal, and then we can go into, if you have some more questions. So the next slide, please. So as Howie was saying, the first component of this proposal is a system-wide easement requirement. And in specifics, it will apply to zoning lots of at least 5,000 square feet that are within 50 feet of a mass transit station, and in applicable zoning districts. And the applicable zoning districts are higher density residential. So essentially anything that is a multifamily resident district, so not single and 2 family houses, and commercial equivalents, and all manufacturing. And so this is an illustrative example of, sort of what a 50-foot area around a station might look like, what tax lots might be subject to this requirement. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what a transit easement actually is. Sort of depending on what the MTA's needs are, it can vary in sort of size. If there's an elevated station, it would be, a sort of easement would be a taller. If it's a below grade station, it might only take up one level of height. And then also depending on what the ask is, if the MTA is looking to have just a staircase, it might be smaller, but it would be larger if we're looking for a stair and an elevator. And so we can go to the next slide. And so in order to accommodate that sort of varying size of an easement, the proposal also includes zoning relief. So if the easement volume takes up some amount of space, we are trying to, allow the developer to fully develop their property. So in order to just make up for that space, maybe that easement volume would get replaced on the top, in which case we have, a height provision. And, if the easement is in a space that there is some kind of parking requirement, that would be sort of, they're coming in juxtaposition with each other. We will have some parking relief so that you're not required to have those parking spaces. And we can go to the next slide, because I know one of the questions was specifically about temporary uses. So, there's some amount of time between when the easement, volume is made and when the MTA will come back to improve that volume. And so we've thought a lot about, sort of how to activate those spaces, how to, make sure that this space is not, empty. And so we, in our zoning proposal, we are allowing for temporary uses in order to activate this unused easement, in the interim between when it is built and when it is built out. And so what we're proposing is compatible uses, commercial uses, or other uses that would already be allowed in that space that are not residential uses. Go to the next slide, please. So the second part of our proposal, as Howard mentioned, is expanding the transit bonus mechanism. as he mentioned, is currently limited in where it currently exists. And actually, we can just jump to the next slide. Sake of time. So our expanded transit bonus program would continue to offer an increase of 20% of floor area bonus, sort of 20% additional in sort of building side, but would also allow sites that are not directly adjacent to the station in order to apply. So you can be within 500 feet of a station if you are in an R9 or an R10 district, so sort of very high residential districts. Or if you're in a CBD, you could be within 1,500 feet. So in the downtown Brooklyn CBD, if you're in, sort of that in the central business district outline, you could be within 1,500 feet of a station in order to apply for bonus to improve that station, which is some distance away. Next slide, please. And so then there was, the question is like what you could have to apply for a bonus. It needs to be a significant station improvement, and that it could include an elevator, or it could include a new entrance, it could include an escalator and a fare array, and that would be at the through a conversation, a negotiation between the MTA and the developer. And also to note that any non-accessible station, the first improvement would have to be a vertical accessibility improvement, an elevator, to allow to make that station ADA accessible. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a map to sort of explain what we're talking about in terms of what expanded coverage is. Currently, you have to be a property that is directly adjacent to a station, and we are proposing it, which is sort of the red on this map, and we are proposing the development sites that are in the blue on this map to also be able to apply for a bonus at the adjacent station. Next slide, please. And I know another question that you had in advance is sort of how does this bonus interact with currently with inclusionary housing? And so in areas where inclusionary housing bonuses are available, you could use our transit bonus in addition to an inclusionary housing bonus. And so you could either get a bonus for inclusionary housing and call it a day. You could get a bonus for a transit improvement, and that's it, or you could use both together. And so in that way, we are not trying, this proposal does not sort of come in conflict with our desires to have more inclusionary housing. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I'm going to stop on to go into Q&A, but it's just a summary of the two parts of our proposal, the easement requirement and the transit bonus program. And I'll leave this on the screen just so you guys sort of have the bullet points in your head. But with that, we can open it to questions.
Is that the full presentation? There's a
Yeah, we have. Yes. I mean, I have a lot of sort of supplemental slides depending on.
Okay. No, I just wanted to confirm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we're open the floor for questions. We do have. I'm going to turn over the floor to Richard Barrett, Director of Revenue. First, Richard.
Hi. So thank you for your presentation. So given that there are several stations in downtown Brooklyn that could benefit from this accessibility issues, right? So including previously non-eligible stations such as York Street with its dead-end platform, which has been a big issue right now, discussions for 69 Adams Street, and the ever-expanding ridership that station has been having. How does the location of the properties seeking upgrades determine which project to fund, or is that solely the discretion that the MTA determines what properties would be funded?
Would you like me to answer that question, Angela? Okay.
Sure, that would be great.
Hi, Moonsum Park with the MTA. So if a developer approaches us in city planning saying that they're interested in getting a transit improvement bonus, first we would have to determine if they're in a central business district or not. If they are not, then we would look to see what stations are within the 500-foot radius. If they're within 1,500 feet, if they're in a central business district, then we would look to see which stations fall within the 1,500-foot radius. Also within the qualifying zoning districts, R9, R10, M16, or the commercial equivalents. So let's just say hypothetically, there are 3 stations because the radius is 1,500 feet away from their development site. There are 3 stations that fall within that radius. Then based on the developer's zoning lot and their base FAR, we would already know what the maximum size of their zoning bonus could be. The maximum size is 20%. We would bring in multiple groups within the MTA who would assess what the station improvement needs are, the access improvement needs are at each of those hypothetical, those 3 stations. And then in some cases, based on the size of the zoning bonus, if it's a relatively small zoning bonus, it may not be possible to take on the improvement at a station that requires a significantly large zoning bonus. But let's just say it's a fairly sized zoning bonus, and you have 2 out of those 3 stations that have fairly straightforward, nothing straightforward at the MTA, but let's just say that they are. Many groups within the MTA, but for example, our Stations and Operations Planning Group, as well as our system-wide accessibility groups, they would have to make a determination of which of these improvements should be improved as a result of the zoning bonus. So there are many variables in play when a developer comes to us. It is going to be the size of the bonus. It is going to be the improvements. Can the size of the bonus cover the cost of the improvements? So it's a long-winded answer. It's a complicated process, but we do engage many groups within the MTA to help determine that. Richard,
So
did you help
strict
a little?
interpretation of what you just described doesn't really help provide resources for York Street. And within 500 feet of York Street, I don't think you have a development site really remaining. So I guess this is something we'll have to talk about internally within the Borough Board and Community Board's 2 representatives, whether we want to try to help York Street out a bit more through this process. And I think what also be helpful is developing an MTA list of what our perceived needs to achieve this agenda, and whether that's part of the zoning text or a appendix, which could be revised, as you understand, or something to think about at least.
You may have to
follow
mute
up.
if everyone could put their line on mute if they're not speaking. Okay, go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So going further, so in terms of the easements, you did talk a little bit about the uses that it could be, for example, nonprofit use, retail use, even if it's not in a commercial overlay, you're saying it could be in retail use, if you could clarify that. And is the revenue going to the building, or is it to the MTA at that point when it's an interim use?
Do you want me to take
Chris,
that?
do you want to grab that
Yeah.
one?
Hi, everybody. There are going to be certain sites that are next to a station that are mapped in a residence district that doesn't today allow for commercial uses. And what we're doing, which is consistent with what we have in the special transit land use district that is mapped along 2nd Avenue, is to allow for local retail uses within 30 feet of an easement volume. And it's really to encourage compatible uses around easements and future station entrances in the future. What we are trying to accomplish here is to prevent a situation where an apartment unit or any residential units are located right next to a station entrance. And in terms of revenue, it would go towards the owner until, yeah. So does that clarify your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. And then you did talk about the bonus, again, the voluntary bonuses in downtown Brooklyn. So at least this is not, well, I mean, it obviously could be a choice of choosing only the transit as opposed to the affordable bonus. But I guess the only issue is where we have the limit on 12 FAR for residential use. And a couple of the blocks in downtown Brooklyn are zone 12 already. So it would just mean that the developer would be incentivized to do it as all, I guess, commercial use if they were to use both bonuses.
Right. So we have the MDL, and it caps residential FAR at 12. So we cannot exceed that for residential. But if they do apply for the transit bonus, then they are able to use their total FAR may be greater than 12 because of the bonus, but they're going to have to use that extra bonus towards commercial or non-residential.
But if they use both bonuses, then in theory, they're taking some of their as of right FAR and simply dedicating it as commercial, and that would enable them to do the residential voluntary bonus plus the transit bonus.
So we have mandatory inclusionary housing, and that's not a bonus, and that's just they're going to have to do that no matter what. And then we have voluntary inclusionary housing, and in that case, what we're saying is they are able to stack the FAR on top of one another. So if today with inclusionary housing they're getting 12, with the transit bonus they can go up to 14.4 FAR in the future, and the 2.4 that is in excess of 12 will have to go towards non-residential.
But if they use both bonuses, could they then say that 2.4 of the as of right 12 is commercial, and therefore the bonusing residential to get up to 12 again, and then 12 residential, so they could have potentially both bonuses and build a 16.8 building where 12 is capped out at residential and the rest is commercial.
Yes, the residential would be capped at 12, and then anything else beyond 12 would have to go towards non-residential use.
And that's it for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that being said, I'd like to open up the floor to board members for questions. Community Board 6, I believe you have a question. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. This is Dr. Van, I'm board member of CB6. My question is about, and I know you made a quick presentation, so I can appreciate you couldn't include too much, but do you already plan to have folks who represent other disabilities beyond just the ability to vertically ascend or descend? Meaning, specifically, you cite the aging population, but the aging population has a bunch of disabilities that run together commonly. There's visual impairment, there's auditory loss, in addition to mobility loss. So really, there's three things. And I'll give you an example. One of the pictures you showed a sign of in the station where you board the train, and you had one of the the classic black signs with the white letters. That's actually a lot easier to read than many signs, and it's high contrast between the letters and a decent size of the letters. So my question really is, are you already planning to address at least those three disabilities under the umbrella of accessibility, or is it simply installing elevators?
So sure, I'll take that, Howard from the MTA again. Well, I'll answer it briefly, then I'm going to ask Rachel Cohen from our System-Wide Accessibility Office to chime in. But generally, as I mentioned at the beginning, this proposal largely focuses on vertical accessibility. It is essentially our largest and most complicated process of getting that into these older stations. And we have this opportunity with with all the development and unfortunately already a number of missed opportunities as the city is growing and there's been development near our stations. But we are focusing on other disabilities like those you've mentioned throughout our system. And I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Cohn to talk more about that.
Thank you. There's also a question for Community Board 7, Julio, CB7.
Sure, but I don't think that they were finished answering the question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Rachel
Yeah.
Cohn from the System-Wide Accessibility Group at Transit. Yeah, just to briefly, echo what Howie said and add on, zoning for accessibility, is focused on vertical access and making these elevator projects more time and cost effective. But when we talk about an accessible station, we do mean all, the whole suite of ADA and other features. So, tactile warning strips on the platform edges, high contrast and also braille and raised text signage, as you mentioned, hearing loops on the station booth. So we have a whole long list of features that go into what we call an accessible station. So when we reference, our numbers of ADA stations, we are talking about the whole suite of accessibility features. But, this proposal and the opportunity to partner with developers, is really about the space and the configuration of vertical access and, the accessible route in general. But we certainly have all of those, other pieces in mind. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you. CB7.
Hi, thank you. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to wrap my head a little bit around the distance around the bonus, and I'm trying to figure out where the 1,500 feet number came from, and how where did that come from? Because I'm just trying to figure out how a building 5 to 6 blocks away from a station would benefit to supporting a train station that is essentially 5-7 blocks away. Particularly given some neighborhoods are struggling with overdevelopment. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the 1,500 feet number.
And I think I'm going to let Vincent or Angela take that, but I'll just start off by saying, just as a clarification, when you are building a station entrance, I think we're all familiar with kind of entrances in the bottom of a building, for example, but under the bonus in zoning for accessibility, if you are 500 feet away, 1,500 feet away, depending on where, you'll be able to build a elevator or other improvement for the MTA, not within your building's footprint or your zoning lot footprint. You'll be able to, whether it's build it on the sidewalk or even build within the station a mezzanine to platform elevator, if that's what the station needs to be made accessible. So I hope that's a helpful clarification. Then turn it over for more of where the 1,500 foot number came from.
I'm going to punt that to city planning, the question about the 1,500 feet.
I guess I can take on that question first, and Angela, if you have anything to add, you can just feel free to chime in. So we have 500 feet outside of what we label as central business districts, and then we have 1,500 feet within central business districts. The central business districts that we selected are really an area that has a high concentration of mass transit stations. And in these areas, it could be expected that with new developments happening, that they would generate future transit riders that would not only use one specific station, but multiple stations. And so we believe that it would be appropriate to allow these developments to provide improvements at not just the closest station, but perhaps at a distance from that development site. And so 1,500 feet, the distance is approximately between 3 to 5 blocks. And we felt like there was still a link in a nexus, a land use nexus, a link between where the improvement could be provided and where the development is happening.
Thank you. Community Board 8. Ethel Pius.
Good evening, everyone. I think this is a progressive proposal from both MTA and DCP, but I am mystified that it took so long for the elevator to be installed for the Brooklyn Museum. Can anyone speak to that? It took almost 20 years.
I will just talk briefly and then maybe turn it over to Andy Inglesweed to speak a little bit more about that specifically. But in general, this proposal is kind of aiming to avoid situations like that and hopefully speed up the ability for us to have improvements at stations across the city, you know, with particularly the easement provision. By having that easement space in a building that we know is set aside, we know that's exactly where the elevator is going to go. We know that there's no underground utility, whether we know it's there, whether it's hidden. We're going to open up the ground and we're going to be surprised when we find it, and it's going to set our project back a long time. Having that easement space is going to be incredibly helpful for us to speed up the process of the construction process and bringing elevators to all of our stations across the city. I'm going to turn over to Andy, if you are able to speak, Andy, to talk a little bit more about what's happened in the past with the Brooklyn Museum. But I know just, you know, we're trying to move away from this, our historic commitment to accessibility in our most recent capital plan, over $5 billion to make, 77 more stations accessible. And that is, kind of the future of the MTA. Although things were handled a little differently in the past.
I have one more question related to that. Brooklyn Museum is a draw for thousands, tens of thousands of people along a year, especially during Cherry Blossom Festival and so on. Are you selecting the existing sites? If there's no development there, how are you going to address the need for the elevator for accessibility if there's no development happening?
Sure. Yeah. So we will continue to, as we do our capital plans every 5 years. And so we select the stations, then we go about building them over the next 5 years. And so, for example, we've already, our capital plan is 2020 to 2024. Our next capital plan, will be 2025 and the 5 years after that. And when we're making that plan, we'll be looking at where there has been development, where there's been easements or bonus elevators provided by developers, and looking to kind of make sure that we are using our system-wide goals for accessibility. In our most recent capital plan, it was that no rider was more than 2 stations away, from an accessible station. Hopefully in the next capital plan, we'll have an even more ambitious goal for how close a rider is away from an accessible station. And so we would take a look at what improvements developers have either built for us, easements that have been set aside, and take that into account when we are planning what stations we're going to be, prioritizing for accessibility treatments using MTA funding under the next capital plan as well.
Thank you for that. And the presentation that you emailed over, is that the current presentation that could be shared with the board members? Or does?
Yes, sure. Okay. We have a larger presentation too, if you want. It's even.
Yeah, so if you give me the larger presentation, so we could get it out to the members. With that being said, CB Community Board 9, you have a question, yes, then we're going to open up the floor to members of the public.
Absolutely, I did have one last question. So first of all, thank you very much for this presentation. And as we're talking about the development of future capital plans, I know that in my district there definitely is a concern with regards to the IRT line, the 2 and the 5. As we're talking about those goals of having, no more than 2 stations apart, I think that line is very neglected after we get past the Franklin Avenue station in terms of, I don't believe there's anything. Or at least I'd have to double check, but I don't believe there's anything along that corridor. And particularly, that's something that's grave, especially as we have one of the stations that is right next to, or that would be the most adjacent to Kings County Hospital, which you would think we would want to make that something that's ADA accessible. So, I'm not sure if you can speak to it now, but it's definitely something I wanted to bring to the attention in terms of that is something I think we really need to make sure that we're looking at, because we do need to pay attention to that line, and especially that station, and if we can definitely improve access around that corridor.
Okay.
Yeah, understood. And you know, I don't have the exact stations on the tip of my fingers in terms of what's in our current capital plan. I certainly don't know what's going to be in future capital plans. But again, just the goals of, you know, no rider more than 2 stations away, and those, you know, are across every line in the system, including, you know, the 2 and the 5 you mentioned. But, you know, happy to make sure we're taking a look at that specifically.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for members of the public? Okay. Nope, let me check in the chat. Okay. That being said, we'd like to thank the Department of City Planning, the MTA, for making themselves available this afternoon. That concludes our business related to New York City Department of Planning, zoning for accessibility. Please note that the Borough Board will be asked to take a position on this matter and conduct this hearing on this item in July. Is that correct, Rich? Is it July or June? I just want to verify. Richard?
Actually, this would be for June.
For June? Okay.
Yeah.
So
The next city planning presentation in May would be for July. So I'll be reaching out to the community boards to see their process in terms of what determinations the boards are making, and then we'll look to coordinate a Borough Board resolution and circulate it to Borough Board members.
Yeah, so as the zoning text has been officially referred to the affected community boards, we urge community board representatives to coordinate with presentations for your board directly before that time frame. That concludes our business. We'd like to thank you guys for attending. You don't have to remain for the rest of the meeting, but you're welcome to. With that being said, thank you. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Howie. Andy, always good to see you. Musam, I'm sorry. Is it? Let me make sure. I lost you.
Moonsun.
Thank you for attending, and the rest of your team. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Okay. Luke, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Bye.
And wonderful. With that being said, we are going to go back to our first item on the agenda, minutes from March 2nd, 2021. Minutes for March 2nd, 2021 was sent prior for board members to review. Copy of the minutes was sent out to all members. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion to adopt the minutes from March 2nd?
Alexander Bakardine moves to adopt the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Gustavo, CB15 moves to second that.
Okay, 17 and then 15. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's one opposed? Any? Okay. No, okay. Anyone abstain? Okay. With that being said, the motion carries. The minutes from March 2nd have been approved. Thank you, guys. We're going to move on to our next presenters on the agenda, which is item number 3. If you guys could get the screen ready to share your screen, we'd like to welcome Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory DNA Learning Center. Wonderful. They're going to speak about a new opening of our 2021 summer camp. This presentation is limited to 10 minutes, followed by Q&A. I'd like to introduce Allison Maley, Assistant Director for the organization. We'll have you state your name, you can introduce yourself, and any of the colleagues that you have here with you today. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Allison Mail. I'm the Assistant Director for DNALC New York City, and also we have our Executive Director, Dave Nicholas, who's going to start the presentation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much to the board for this opportunity to present to you. We're new neighbors of yours, and it's totally different from the Transit Authority. We're from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, which is a great place for both science and education. Oh, now my thing's not advancing. Oh, there it is. We're known for our science. We've been home to 8 Nobel Prize winners over the years. But we continue to do really good science. So we're rated #1 in the world for the impact of the science that is done at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, meaning that for each paper that's published by a Cold Spring Harbor scientist, it's cited more times per paper than any other place, any other scientific institution in the world. This is the DNA Learning Center, which we're going to talk to you about tonight, and our new location that we're opening in Brooklyn. We're focused entirely on science education. We're like a science center, and we like to keep track of the people, the students that we involve around the world. And you can see that if we add up the students that we deal with locally in the metropolitan New York area, you'll learn more about our summer camps, but also school classes during the school year, research projects, about 20 places around the world that are aligned with the way that we do things and do similar labs, kits that are sold by companies for kids to do labs, and online analysis that kids do. You'll see that we reach well over 500,000 students per year around the world. Well, we really want to tell you what we're excited about, which is to become a member of the Brooklyn community at this facility at the City University of New York's City Tech campus. You might recognize this building at the corner of Tillery and Adams Street. And we have a 30-year lease with the City University of New York for the whole second floor of this Pearl Street building, which is about 17,000 square feet. We're almost finished with renovations of that, and we plan to open in May of this year. Let me just show you the floor plan. It will join with our center here in Cold Spring Harbor, one up in Tarrytown, New York at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, and one that we currently run in Harlem, and we'll have 4 centers in the metropolitan New York area. Here's a layout of the center that will open on Tillery and Adams Street. It's accessible by its own stairwell as well as an elevator here with the entrance out on Tillery Street. There's a large exhibit area, and around the outside of the building are 6 teaching classrooms in green, 2 bioinformatics labs, which are computer labs, a lunchroom because the students really need to have a place to eat, especially on a field trip, and staff offices. I'll give you a look at what's going on there right now. Here's the renovation going on in the exhibit space. Here's the exhibit space looking out towards Tillery Street and what it will look like when it's done. Here's a hallway leading to labs on the right and the lunchroom on the left. The lunchroom itself, a typical classroom, and the bioinformatics labs. Well, the final thing I want to say quickly before turning it over to Allison is that we really are coming home to Brooklyn with this project, because the forerunner of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory was called the Biological Lab at Cold Spring Harbor. It was founded in 1890 by the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences. It was actually the first major project that the Brooklyn Institute did after it was reorganized in the late 1800s. But after the founding of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, 4 other major institutions were folded into the Brooklyn Institute. And you'll recognize all of these places around and about Brooklyn: the Academy of Music, the Brooklyn Museum, the Children's Museum, and the Botanic Garden. But they were all founded or folded into the Brooklyn Institute after Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. So when we open our new center on Tillery and Adams Street in 2021, the DNA Learning Center will be coming home to Brooklyn to join its sibling organizations along the axis of Flatbush Avenue. And that concludes what I had to say. I want to turn it over to Allison, who tell you specifically about the summer camps that we're holding this summer. And we'd love to have your help in getting lots of families and students involved. Allison?
Thanks, Dave. So I just want to quickly show you, as Dave said, a little bit about our summer camps. We are planning a full schedule of in-person camps at our new location with as many students as we can safely host. We also continue to offer virtual camps that we developed last summer. And you can see here we have one of our instructors doing a live camp. We also have on-demand camps where students still receive a kit to do hands-on science, but have recorded videos that they can watch. I won't go into detail in our current COVID-19 safety net, but we have our protocols on our website. And of course, we continue to assess and edit our protocols as the science and guidance emerges. But these right now include daily health surveys, masking, social distancing, sanitizing. Our educators are all in the process of being vaccinated. And currently in our Cold Spring Harbor location, we do have a Saturday class where we have a very limited number of students. But you can see we have set up a camera system so that the educator can be in the front of the room, provide really good detailed instruction, but not have to approach the students as closely. So we're ready to do varying levels of contact depending on how things are going in the summer. But we're hoping to have as many students as possible in the rooms. And the rest of the pictures I'm going to show are from pre-pandemic times, so no masks and no distancing. But I just want to quickly show you our series of camps, which can be taken in series as students start in 6th grade and move up to the end of high school, but can also be jumped in at the appropriate grade level, even if they haven't taken our previous courses. So we have Fun with DNA for the youngest students we serve, where students do a lot of fun things like build cell models and extract DNA. This is followed by World of Enzymes. Green Genes, where students get to work with fluorescent bacteria and in the end paint these agar art, bacteria art. Forensic Detectives, students analyze both DNA and other types of forensic evidence. DNA Science, which does a lot of our molecular genetics. DNA barcoding, so students use DNA to identify species of plants or invertebrates. We also have some DNA barcoding research programs that happen during the school year. A biocoding camp, as we recognize more and more, there's coding and programming involved in biology. And lastly, a genome science camp, which is really the most in-depth look at human DNA, and students get to analyze their own DNA in this course. So I will wrap it up there and just leave our website here for a moment, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. So before we go into questions, I'd like to just backtrack with the members. We didn't officially call the roll. So Michelle, before we go into questions, Michelle, are you there? Michelle Crutchfield?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so we're going to start off with community board. And Michelle is Special Assistant to Deputy Board President. You can start with the community board.
Okay. Community Board 1.
Here.
Community Board 2. Community Board 3.
Richard Flateau here.
Community Board 4.
Mato Robert here.
Community Board 5. Community Board 6.
Dan Krishnamurthy here.
Community Board 7.
Julia Pena here.
Community Board 8.
Ethel Tyus present.
Community Board 9.
Fred Baptiste, CB9 Chair, present.
Community Board 10.
Josephine Beckman present.
Community Board 11. Community Board 12.
Barry Spitzer, Community Board 12.
Community Board 13. Community Board 14.
Gail Smith present, and I know our esteemed chair is present as well.
Thank you. Community Board 15.
Teresa Scavo, chair present.
Thank you. Community Board 16.
Janice Morgan present.
Thank you. Community Board 17.
Joan Alexander Bakrdine present.
Thank you. Community Board 18. We'll roll call the council members now. Council Member Levine. Council Member Reynoso. Council Member Combo. Council Member Cornegie.
Ian Fullerton from Councilmember Cornegie's office, present.
Thank you. Community Board, Council Member Diaz.
Jeanette Gonzalez representing Councilwoman Dharma Diaz.
Councilmember Menchaca,
Ching Lin for Councilmember Menchaca, present.
Councilmember Lander.
Fazia Siddiqui for Councilmember Lander, present.
Thank you. Councilmember Eugene. Councilmember Amikri Samuels.
Kim Robinson for Councilmember Samuel.
Councilmember Barron. Councilmember Brannan.
Michael Sheldon here for Councilmember Brannan.
Thank you. Councilmember Yeager. Councilmember Lewis.
Christia Winter, present.
Councilmember Mizell.
Jonathan Allen for Councilmember Mizell, present.
Councilmember Trega. Councilmember Deutsch.
Councilmember present. Brown for.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, this is Lucian Allen for Councilmember Majority Leader Combo. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I couldn't get off.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you.
So for the record, Councilmember Cumbo's office and, right, and the board president.
Yes.
Okay, so just Grant, if you could assist her with just doing a final tally for the record.
$24.
Okay, wonderful. I guess for the official record, the minutes still stand. Moved by Joan Bacadine, second by Teresa Scavo from CB15, and all members agreed and said aye, right? Officially on record. Thank you guys. So we're going to take it back to our presenters. If anyone has any questions regarding DNA Learning Center Summer Camp. We'll open up the floors to members.
I have a question.
Hi, good afternoon. Oh, sorry.
This is Bias with CBA. Are there fees? How do we check on the fees, and how do we let our residents know that this wonderful center is available for the summer?
Yes, the schedule of fees are at the site. All of the courses are 1 week long. They last typically from about 9:30 in the morning to about 3:30 in the afternoon. Most of the camps cost about $500 per week, but we have scholarships available, and that's prominently on the site. Who would like to have a scholarship or needs one, we will provide that.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Joan Bacardine from Community Board 17. I do have a seemingly random question, but I think it's appropriate regarding where your alumni are published. Because you were bragging about a few of them earlier, and I just wanted to kind of check in. I saw you mentioned Nature, but are there? Yeah.
Well, the citation impact is they look at about 30 or 40 of the most impactful journals, but the scientists at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory published in all of the major journals as well as minor ones, but they publish in Cell and Science and Nature and Genome Science, places like that. But because we got this high impact rating because they tend to publish in high impact journals that are widely read and considered, notable.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions from board
I have
members?
one question. Oh. Is it right if I
Yes,
ask
go
one?
ahead.
I just want
Yes.
to know if there was a flyer.
Oh,
or
name and
something.
board. Oh,
sorry,
name and board.
This is Lucian Allen, Majority Leader Combo's office. I was just trying to find out if there was a flyer that we could be able to share for this throughout our network.
Well, one, you can go to this website, but if we were given a mailing list or something, we'll be happy to send things to you, or we could send them to the secretary and have them distributed. Whatever mechanism you would like, we would be happy to do.
I'll send you I'll message you my email address.
Great, and we appreciate it. If you can pass on the information or even just DNA Learning Center, people can search for that, especially if you pass it on to teachers, because we know that most of the students find out about our camps from their classroom teachers, but also, of course, talk to your friends and relatives. It's very difficult, of course, to get started in these times after the pandemic, but we're really there. We scheduled a pretty full schedule, so we're hoping against hope that we have lots of children coming.
Great.
Yeah.
I recommend then that you
Allison,
leverage the.
Allison, I'm sorry, Allison, if you could also send me a copy of that, I'll make sure you get out to the members. And if you want to just drop your website in the chat, that'll be great too as well.
That was going to be my recommendation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi,
Allison,
everyone.
will you do that?
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board?
Yes, I had a question. Hi, it's Joanne Brown, Chair CB14. So congratulations on coming back to Brooklyn. So Community Board 14 actually has a very robust youth conference that we hold in May. And this would be an amazing opportunity for you to come and introduce yourselves to our youth. My quick question is there a deadline for scholarship applications, considering that you're starting on June 28th? Our youth conference is going to be at the end of May.
Not really. As long as we have space, we'll take it. But I would encourage the families of the students that you work with to apply even ahead of your conference if they're interested. But we'll have, as long as we have openings, we will take students. And the other thing I wanted to say, we're planning to open in May, sort of a soft opening, but we'll have staff there. We'll be having some open houses. We'll be open, at certain times every day. So if you're in the neighborhood, by all means, pop by and have a look at the place, or get our phone number and call, and we'll be happy to give you a tour, or any people that you know, or if the members of the boards would like to schedule an event, an afternoon coffee or cocktail or something, we'd be happy to have you all come back and show you around.
That sounds great. I just want to be able to somehow reach out to you and perhaps have you join our youth conference for a short presentation. We're still working out the details, but let me know what the best way to reach out to you and Allison is.
Yeah, you can reach out to Allison by email. Maybe she could put her email as well as my email on the chat. Yeah, you're welcome to email us or text us anytime. We're really happy to be in the community, and we're really, like a lot of you, we want to come roaring out of the pandemic and, with a head start, and allow people to get back to the cultural institutions of New York City. We're really gung-ho for that.
Okay. We're coming up on time on this item, so I'd just like to welcome the new chair for CB14, Joanne Brown. And we have a question from, we also have a representative on the line from Public Advocate Jamani Williams. Just want to acknowledge them. And we're going to go to CB Community Board 1.
Yes, I'd like to know what is the age for your summer camp? How many weeks is it? And what's the price range? Thank you.
Did you
hear the question?
Did you hear the question, Dave, Allison?
Yeah, it looks like maybe Dave is frozen. So we have camps starting for students who have finished 5th grade, entering 6th grade in the fall, up through the end of high school. They last 1 week each, although there is that series of camps, so some students would be eligible to take potentially more than one in a summer. And the cost is around $500. It depends on the camp, but as Dave said, pretty much if someone asks for a scholarship, there's a scholarship available for them.
Okay. What are the hours?
They start around 9:30 a.m. They're a little bit variable depending on the camp, but it'll start around 9:30 a.m. and then run through the early afternoon to 3:30 p.m.
Thank you.
Community Board 6 has a question, and then we'll open the floor to the public for any questions they may have.
Okay, thanks. It's Dr. Van, I'm a board member of CB6. Very cool that you're doing this. A few questions, so feel free to write them down. One, what are you using for security for the DNA sequencing? As I'm sure you know, so discrimination based on for medical insurance is protected by Congress, but by federal law, but it's not for life insurance and other things. So I would highlight that what are you using? Second question, are you covering polygenic risk scoring and imputation? Because again, I'm sure you know this, there's growing data that you can use even something from 23andMe and some of these with relatively few SNPs and start to model using imputation risk for things like future coronary disease, stroke, and so on. And then my third question is, are you discussing the kind of the severe limitations on diversity in terms of genetic data and databases? So the same cool things we're seeing with imputation and modeling, the biggest risk, biggest limitation that I see is that it lacks a lot of diversity, the input data in terms of ethnic background as well as, ancestry background, I should say, where you were born.
Yes, Dr. Krishnamurthy, I can answer those all at one time. The part of the DNA sequence that students look at does not code for any trait or any protein. So it's part of the so-called non-coding. So it really doesn't have a lot of information there so far as risks that you might have for disease. There's none. We've been doing it since we were actually the first personal DNA project doing this non-coding part of DNA. And we've had over 100,000 students participate, and we've never had any problems of non-paternity or any of the rare sorts of things that might turn up. We have an exhibit that actually deals in a big sense on human DNA diversity. And one of the topics will actually be the underrepresentation of DNA data from parts of the world and from groups. And at the same time, how certain groups of people can be at risk for certain diseases more so than others. So we're really hoping to do a great job on what DNA has to say about social justice. So that's a huge problem that we're all dealing with now, and we hope to provide kids an insight into what science has to say about social justice. And the main take-home message is everyone alive today has common ancestors in Africa about 100,000 years ago. We're all extraordinarily closely related. You could say sort of inbred compared to other living things. And the things that make us look different on the outside are just a tiny proportion of our genetics. So we hope to get those very hopeful messages out to kids, but also give them the opportunity to learn about the new world and how DNA will hopefully help us all into the future. So thanks for that great question. I hope you'll come by. I hope you'll become involved because I think you'll find it really fascinating. But really, I hope all of you will just, even if you're just a tiny bit interested in science, take the opportunity to come down and see what we have. The exhibits, though small, are going to be really quite far-ranging, from photography to recreations of ancient burials in Israel to modern medicines. You'll really like it. And thank you all again for letting us come to speak with you today.
Yes, officially, do we have any members from the public that have any questions for our presenters today? Okay. No, we do not. Okay.
Yes, I have a question. I'd like to know, Jeanette Gonzalez,
Can
first of all.
you state your name?
Jeanette Gonzalez. I am representing Councilwoman Darma Diaz.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to know if how many openings per age range do you have for these courses?
Well, we've made a schedule that we would call a half schedule because, all the difficulties in us just opening. But we have scheduled 30 week-long camps. Each one of them can hold about 20 or 25 kids. So we could accommodate up to about 700 kids this summer. There break out about, I would say, about equal numbers of middle school students versus high school students. So 300 or 400 middle school students up to, and 300 or 400 high school students.
Thank you for that.
And it'd be a miracle if we got up to that number.
Yeah, but thank you very much.
So help us make a miracle.
Okay, so that concludes our business. We'd like to thank Allison and Dave from DNA Learning Lab about sharing the wonderful program with us. That concludes our business. Thank you guys for joining us. You're welcome to stay for the meeting. Yes, Fred, thank you. We have one more presenter for this evening. It's our fourth item on the agenda. I would like to get them ready. Eric, are you here?
I am.
Okay, wonderful. Eric Friedman is Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. He is going to be doing a presentation tonight on ranked choice voting in Brooklyn. They have done a presentation at the Borough Board in the Bronx, and they're going around to different Borough Boards to do presentations, so he's here tonight. We're gonna, I'm sorry, David, I'm gonna allow you to, you need to share your screen. You have a PowerPoint? Do you have a colleague? Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and share.
Yeah, wonderful.
Do folks see the slide up on the screen there?
Thank you so much. You could begin. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, first I want to thank you. I know we've had a few presentations, so I'll try and be efficient with your time. But I want to thank you for affording me the opportunity to come and speak to you all about ranked choice voting in New York City and in Brooklyn coming up this year. So I will start just by saying, well, who is the Campaign Finance Board? Why are we here? The CFB is a nonpartisan, independent city agency. And we empower New Yorkers to make a greater impact on their elections. We do this in a couple ways. We administer the Public Matching Funds program for city elections. And we engage voters through our NYC Votes initiative. But specifically to the conversation we're going to have tonight, we have a charter mandate to conduct voter education and outreach specifically around ranked choice voting and introducing it to New Yorkers. So I want to acknowledge before we get into it that, change is not always an easy thing, right? There's always something a little bit scary about trying something for the first time, especially when it comes to voting. This has been quite a year we've had over the past, really 12 to 18 months in voting. Coming into the pandemic, we had a lot of people learning to vote by mail for the very first time, and all the challenges that came with that. A lot of folks, last year voted early for the very first time. There's been a lot of pushback around the country against measures like these that make it easier for people to vote. People are talking a lot about what's happening in Georgia right now, but there are a lot of states that that have run by one party that are looking for ways to restrict access to the vote right now. So I want to start off by saying ranked choice voting is a positive development for voters. It gives voters more opportunities to express their preferences. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as I make my way through the presentation. But I want all of you to be excited about the opportunities we have in front of us. We're going to elect a new mayor this year. We're going to elect a new city council this year. And so we at CFB want to make sure that everybody has the basic information they need to cast your vote with confidence. So the basics, ranked choice voting is a new way for voters to elect their representatives. You can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference instead of choosing just one. So this is going to give voters more say in who wins. It can increase civility between candidates and lead to less negative campaigning. And it can lead to more diverse candidates winning office and serving. So ranked choice voting is used across the country, in about 17 states, 17 cities across the country, a couple of states. And it is coming this year to New York City. But I guess the first question is, how did it get here? In November 2019, a question was put on the ballot by the Charter Revision Commission to establish ranked choice voting in some local elections. It was passed with 73 7.5% of the vote. So it's important to understand this is a reform that was a question was put to the voters, and it's a reform that came from the voters. It was not imposed on us by a governor, by a legislature. This is something that came from New York City voters. Something that's also, I think, useful to understand as we move into this first election with ranked choice voting. Close to 3/4 of those who turned out in 2019 voted yes, but there are some areas where the policy had greater support. You can see those in darker green. Some areas of the city where support was a little bit less, like those kind of that orangey brown are areas where the question did not have a majority. And you can see as we focus on Brooklyn, some of those areas in North Brooklyn were strong for ranked choice. And then if you move down towards South Brooklyn, you had some less support and maybe a little bit of opposition. So I think that's kind of useful to see as we get started. But so here's a basic cheat sheet for ranked choice voting in New York City. It's used starting January 1st, 2021. So we are into it. It is used only in special and primary elections. So there are voters in Queens, voters in Bronx who've had special elections for city council so far this year, and they've had an opportunity to use ranked choice voting. In Brooklyn, you'll get your first opportunity. I am a Brooklyn resident, will get our first opportunity to use ranked choice voting this June in the primaries. It is not used in general elections, and it is only used in special or primary elections for the offices of mayor, public advocate, controller, borough president, and city council. So city offices, we'll call those. It's not used for federal offices like president or Congress. It's not used for state races like governor, state senate, state assembly, and it isn't used in judicial elections. So the last part's important to understand because it means there are some ballots that people will get in June that will have both ranked choice and single choice elections side by side on the same ballot. There are a couple boroughs that have DA's races. Those are single choice elections, not ranked choice. Before ranked choice came along, we used single choice plurality elections. I'm sorry, it's a tough word. Plurality elections in primary and special elections for those city offices. So voters got to choose only one candidate for each office, and the candidate with the most votes wins. And that before this year, that's how we voted in every election. Because, prior to this year, some of those single choice plurality elections can result in the candidate winning with a low percentage of the vote. The charter required a runoff primary election for mayor, public advocate, or controller for those citywide offices if there's no candidate who got 40% of the total vote. So, what are the problems that ranked choice voting helps to solve? In those elections where you have a winning candidate who was opposed by, you could have winning candidates who are opposed by 2/3 of the electorate. That's why it's important to have a majority winner. It means the old way, the single choice election, means that a candidate with a narrow, dedicated base can win, even if you had as much as 2/3 of the electorate who voted against that candidate. Runoffs, some of the problems with runoffs can be really expensive. To bring out all the machines and hire up the poll workers, over 5 years, over 20 years, let's say, you could save up to $100 million by just getting rid of the runoffs, which is what ranked choice voting does. Another issue with runoffs is, you have a smaller electorate that's less representative. If you look at the past few runoffs that we've had in city elections, 2013, for public advocate, turnout dropped by 2/3 between the primary and the runoff. And it means the people who are picking the winner, they're less diverse in terms of race, they're older, more highly educated, and ultimately not representative of the electorate at large. So ranked choice voting eliminates runoffs. And it means that the same voters who vote in the primary are the voters who determine the winning candidate without having to come back 4 weeks later to vote in a different election. And another reminder, voters are still using those single choice elections for federal, state, judicial offices, district attorney, and in general elections for city offices. So here we're going to get to the nuts and bolts. How does ranked choice voting work? So here are the steps, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. You pick your first choice candidate in that first column here in this representation of the ballot that we've created. If you have a second choice, you fill in the oval on that second choice as you move from the left to the right. You can rank up to 5 candidates, or as many are running in that election. You can also vote for just 1 or 2 candidates if you choose. It's up to each individual voter to decide for themselves. You should know, as a voter, ranking more candidates does increase your chances to be sure your preference is heard. Also, something to note that kind of follows logic, the number of ranks available to the voter is going to match the number of candidates running. So if there are only 3 candidates on the ballot, you'll see 4 ranks available to choose, to take into consideration the write-in candidate. You can see there on the bottom line of that representation of the ballot, you know, all of the New York ballots provide an opportunity to write in a candidate. And that's where you do it there. So as we're talking about the ballot, there are a couple of potential errors and pitfalls. It's really important to recognize and learn about and think about. The first one is do not give multiple candidates the same rank. You can see here in this example, you have a voter who tried to rank both candidate B and candidate C first on their ballot. This ballot will be rejected. If you are voting in person at a poll site, the machine will kick it back out to you, and you will have up to 2 more opportunities to get a new ballot, a clean ballot, and cast a vote that counts. But if you're going to be voting by mail, and I know a lot of us will continue to be voting by mail this year as we still deal with the pandemic, you don't get that opportunity for instant feedback. So it's really important to be aware that giving 2 candidates the same rank can invalidate your ballot. The next is don't rank a candidate more than once. And you can see here in this example, you have a voter who tried to rank candidate B first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Now, this is not going to invalidate your ballot, but you know, it doesn't help candidate B any more than just voting for candidate B as your first choice. There's no benefit to ranking the same candidate more than once. And really what it does for the voter, it deprives you of your opportunity to give your second, third, fourth, and fifth rank to different candidates. And if your chosen candidate doesn't win, it deprives the voter of the opportunity to support one or more of the other candidates. I'm going to go briefly now into the counting process. And I think it's important and helpful to see it because it helps explain why you want to rank more than one candidate. So here's the first round. It's really very simple. All the first ranked votes are counted from every voter's ballot. If any candidate gets more than 50% of those votes, they win, and you're done. You can see in this example, candidate B received 54% of the first choice votes. Candidate B is the winner, all of it. However, if there's no candidate who gets more than 50% of the first choice votes, you can see here we've changed the facts a little bit. In this example, all 4 candidates have less than 50% of those first choice votes. So now counting is going to continue in rounds. In every round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. So I'll explain by kind of walking through a single voter's example ballot shown here on the left. So here's a voter who ranked candidate D as their first choice. In our example, candidate D also has the fewest number of votes in the first round with only 12%. So candidate D will be eliminated. And those 12% of voters who chose candidate D in this round have their vote moved to the next highest ranked candidate on each of their ballots. So for our example voter, they rank candidate C second. So their vote is going to move to candidate C. But not every voter ranked candidate C second. Some of those voters rank candidate B second. Some of them rank candidate A second. So those votes are going to move to the next candidate on their ballot. So this increases the vote totals for A, B, and C. So you can see here as we redo the count, candidate A is going to go up to 31. Candidate B goes from 39 to 45. And candidate C, got 2% and moved from 22 to 24. So I think you see where this is going. In every round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Our example voter, they rank candidate C as their second choice. Of the candidates remaining, candidate C is in last place with 24%. So here we go. Candidate C is eliminated, and that 24% whose vote was with candidate C, their votes are going to move to the next highest ranked candidate on each of their ballots. So for our example, our example voter ranked candidate B third. So their vote moves to candidate B. Not every voter ranked candidate B next. Some voters have candidate A ranked next. So the votes move to whichever candidate is next on the ballot. This will increase the vote totals for the two remaining candidates, A and B. And you've got two candidates left and the counting process is over. Candidate B wins with 58% of the vote. All of this tabulation should happen on a computer, but there's a little bit of a complexity of multiple rounds of shifting votes. So here are the main takeaways for voters. If you prefer, you can still vote for just your first choice candidate. But it's important to remember that ranking other candidates will not harm your first choice candidate. By ranking multiple candidates, you still get a chance to impact who gets elected, even if your top choice doesn't win. Ranking those multiple candidates ensures your vote can go towards the second, third, fourth, or fifth choice if your top choice is eliminated, giving you more say in who the winner is. You can rank up to 5 candidates, but you don't need to rank all 5. But again, it's important to remember if you rank 5 candidates, that's not, you don't get 5 votes. It's still one person, one vote. At any given time, as the votes get counted, each voter has exactly 1 vote at any one time. And just the last piece, you need to know, as we saw last year, the winner in some of these races is not going to be known on election night. So it's important for everybody to have their expectations set properly as to when the results of these elections might be known. It can take a week or longer to count all the votes. And remember, I think we're seeing this in the special elections that have been going on through the spring, that absentee ballots can take as much as 2 weeks to come back after a special election, 7 days after a primary election. So the counting will start late and it could take a little while until we know who the winners are. But it is also just important to understand what the benefits are for voters in the system. And it's really, again, aimed at increasing the impact of your vote. Voters have more say in ranked choice voting elections. Even if your top choice doesn't win, you can still help choose who wins. You can vote for your top choice first without worrying about who's more likely to win. Like you look at kind of the presidential primaries are a great example. There's all this talk about, well, do I vote for the candidate who I really like? Do I vote for the candidate who I think will win the general election? Ranked choice voting kind of takes some of those strategic voting concerns off the table. It means you can vote for your favorite candidate and also give a ranking to the candidate who you think is most electable. It also means candidates are more likely to appeal to a wider audience. It means that candidates can't win only with the support of their base. We know from research and experience that most voters don't like negative campaigning. We're starting to see, if you're following the mayoral race, you're starting to see candidates take shots at one another. This is true. But at the end of the day, it's the voters who are going to have their say on election day as to whether that's an effective way to campaign under ranked choice. What we've seen in other jurisdictions that have had ranked choice voting for a while is that ranked choice does lead to more civility and less negativity between candidates. Voters get to hear from more candidates who aren't only campaigning for that first choice vote, but are asking for a second or a third. To do that, they need to appeal to a wider audience. It makes candidates sometimes work a little harder, talk to voters in more communities, and find more ways to appeal for their support. And third, voters elect more diverse candidates under ranked choice. I think we all, I hope we all believe that government is most effective when it is representative of the people it serves. And what we've seen, the experience in other cities with ranked choice voting, is that elected officials are more representative of the communities they serve. So, 7 cities that use ranked choice voting have either achieved or surpassed gender parity in their city legislature. It's a big issue, in gender representation is a big issue in the New York City Council. And cities that use ranked choice voting are closer to gender parity than we are in New York City. In the 13 largest municipalities that use ranked choice, 6 have women mayors, 4 of them have Black, Latino, or Asian mayors. And in ranked choice voting cities, you do see more women candidates and women candidates of color being elected, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. You have a couple of cities in that area with ranked choice. And I think from before and after, you see an increase not only in the percentage of candidates of color running for office, but an increase in the probability of women candidates and women candidates of color winning office. And so again, these are all good signs, and hopefully things that we will see as ranked choice voting takes hold here in New York City. So just a reminder, our chance in Brooklyn to use ranked choice voting for the first time is coming up. We're a little more than 2 months away from the start of early voting. Every voter registered in a political party holding a primary is eligible to vote in June. All 3 of those citywide offices are up for election. All the borough president offices are up for election. All 51 seats of the city council. We have some incumbents, some of whom are represented here on the call, but every seat has an election coming up, and so this is a very big and important election for New York City. I want to leave you before I finish with just a few other places to look for information and resources. We've got a ton of information available through our website. Ranked choice voting, that first address, nyccfb.info/RCV. We've got a brand new video that we've got that's up that you can kind of look at and share. We've got a version of this PowerPoint available in multiple languages. All of the information available on our website, thanks to a partnership with Democracy NYC and the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Affairs. It's available now in 14 languages. And so you can find all of those resources on our website. And we conduct training sessions, in-depth training sessions for folks twice a week on Wednesdays and Thursdays, sort of train the trainer sessions to help, much more in-depth training than this, to help give folks the tools they need to educate their communities. And you can sign up for those sessions on our website. Follow us on social media at NYC Votes on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. I'll give a sort of a brief shout out to the Board of Elections. Their site is at vote.nyc. They've got some good resources on their website as well, including an explainer video that they've created, as well as information about where to find your poll site, information about using the ballot marking devices that is specific to the ranked choice voting ballot. So all of that is good information that's available through the Board of Elections. I will end here. If you are interested in scheduling training, we are happy to come, to the community boards. We've worked with elected officials and council members all over the city to help schedule trainings for voters. We are eager and more than happy to collaborate with any and all of you to help get the word out. You can reach me at that address. That's my email. I'll leave my phone number in the chat, and I will end here.
Okay, Eric. Yep. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
So I'm going to open up the floor for questions from the board members. I am going to first start with our Deputy Brooklyn Borough President, Chaplain Dr. Ingrid Sluse-Martin, and then we'll open up to members from the public. Thank you.
Hello to all the board members. It's good to see all of you guys. Savannah, you've been doing a great job of running the meetings on all of the days that I've been so busy. I have more of a, the question is one in terms of education. This is really cute what you did today. We appreciate it. And I know that you've been going to maybe precinct councils and other small organizations, but in Brooklyn alone, there's 2.6 million people in Brooklyn alone. So what is being done to educate the masses? Most people, if you ask the average person, they don't know what ranked choice voting is. So what is being done so that the masses understand it? Even when ranked choice voting was passed in the referendum, most people didn't vote whether or not to pass ranked choice voting because they didn't know what ranked choice voting was. When ranked choice voting was initiated, there was a promise to educate people. That promise has failed. So what is being done to ensure that by June 12th, just 2.6 million people in Brooklyn alone, I'm not even adding Manhattan, the Bronx, it's 8 point something million people in New York City. What's being done? Because I have a concern about that, a genuine one.
I know, I appreciate your question. And look, I'll say this: we have a broad-based advertising promotional campaign planned that is rolling out early next month. We will have, in addition to that, I mean, so that'll be, you'll see advertising on bus shelters, you know, on the radio, on television, in print, you know, outlining the basic facts and pointing people to resources that'll help them learn more. We are preparing and we'll be mailing closer to the election our voter guide, which is a resource that gets into every home with a registered voter. That guide will contain a lot of the basics that you heard here, with all of the steps that voters need to understand how to engage in ranked choice voting. So I understand and appreciate the question, and I agree that education is important, and we have worked hard over this time to kind of, you know, we've spent a lot of time talking to folks like yourselves who kind of live and breathe this stuff. You know, I think at the same time, you know, and you know, there are a lot of voters out there who aren't yet tuned in, right? You know, who, you know, I think some of the polls that I've seen measuring the mayor's race, you know, you still have something like half the voters who aren't ready to express a preference. So, you know, I appreciate the question. I think I share your concern that education is important, and we are planning and will have information that we're going to get in front of every voter to ensure they have what they need to vote with confidence in June.
I mean, in how many different languages is this education and this bus and ads being done in? You have people here who vote in all kinds of languages, all types of languages. And it took a very long time for people to even understand conceptually how to vote, especially people who are not strong English speakers. What's being done to help them? Understood.
So, you know, in the languages that I think where you see the largest populations, you'll see kind of some of those resources sort of broadcast generally, right? So the video that I talked about, that's in all of the Voting Rights Act languages. That's, you know, in addition to English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Bengali. And so a lot of the promotion and advertising will focus on those languages. You know, some of the resources that I talked about, you know, we have resources available, as I said, in another 11 additional languages, and we'll be working to target those resources to communities where they're going to make an impact. You know, I think we've spent a lot of time kind of looking to see where people are, and we want to make sure that our first step has been to create the materials, and now we just, you know, our work is to get them, talk to people where they are, and so we have partnerships with organizations all over the city that are helping us out. You know, making sure that we are both timely and efficient in the way that we're communicating this information and help to voters.
Savannah, what's that? There's a gentleman that's been contacting us somewhere. Was it California?
I believe yes, correct, California.
I think it's California, because ranked choice voting was used there, and I think that they got rid of it. So I'm just saying, I believe it's California, and he was explaining to us why it was ineffective and it wasn't any good. And I don't know how many people on this call are old school board members, but it seems very similar to the system that we got rid of with the school board because you couldn't really get the right person elected. So now they're using this same system as ranked choice voting. It didn't work with the school boards. So what makes everyone so, not everyone, what makes whoever came up with the idea of doing ranked choice voting so gun-ho that it's the best thing to do? We used it back when I was a teacher in the 80s, that's what was used. There was the board of estimates, and there was the school board, and they used to elect people in the school board using a ranked choice vote system, which was a failed system. Everybody knew it wasn't a good system then. So I don't understand for the life of me why something that didn't work for a small entity as the school board is being viewed as a great entity to elect our city council members, our borough presidents, and our mayor. It makes no sense. And there's no educational piece that goes with it. It makes no sense. In fact, I'm incensed by it. I'm annoyed. You can tell. And I'm not usually annoyed on these calls. I'm usually happy because I see a lot of people that I love on these calls. But this is very annoying to me. I think that people will be disenfranchised. I don't see how, if you're uneducated on how to use a system, how can you then effectively use it? And you're saying that people are going to get ads in different languages and stuff like that, but where are they getting these ads at? How do you know it's going to get to these individuals? What extra pieces will be put in place for them if they don't understand it? What's being done for them?
So I'm happy to connect offline if you'd like more details.
No, I don't want to connect offline.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm asking you questions. I don't want to connect offline. I'm asking you questions that people want to hear the answers to. So connect online now.
Okay, so look, we spend a lot of time trying to make sure. Again, we are going to have a broad advertising campaign, and I guess I don't have all of the details of it at my fingertips right now. Would love to share it with you, but I don't want to, just don't have the details in front of me. We've done a lot of research to make sure that we have information that will be helpful to voters, that will get to them when they need it, and will get to them, give them the tools that they need to vote with confidence. I'm sorry to say I'm not conversant in the way that the system worked under the school board. What I can say, and the reason I'm here, is that this is a system that is going to be used in the primary in June, and we're doing everything we can to make sure people are ready. So I spend a little time talking about why the system works and what the benefits are, because it helps to get voters excited and want to learn more about the system. And so that is why I think we spend time, during these presentations that we make, talking about the benefits that voters should see, and the benefits that voters in other places that have ranked choice voting have experienced after they've adopted it. So, I appreciate, again, I appreciate where you're coming from. I think the most useful thing and where I think our focus is going to be is continuing to do everything we can to make sure that voters are ready. Because I agree, I like that, like we share that concern. Is just making sure that voters are ready in June to make their voices heard.
So I do have questions from Community Board 4, Community Board 7, and CB 10. So can we go in that order? If CB4?
Yes.
CB...
It's not a question. It's
okay,
not a question. Is a concern, because all the time when you guys create something new, you don't educate us first. You do it, and then the status quo that know about it puts it in there to vote, and that's what they always do. They don't educate us. You have a lot of Latinos that don't read and write, like my dad, but know the name and know the person, know where to go. Now you're gonna have 500 people on one list, and he's got to go one. They're not gonna be doing that. You got people that are 60, 70 years old that can go in there and press a button. Before it used to be a button, then you used to color the dot. Now you got 500 people that you got to do 1, 2, 3. People are not gonna do that. So when you do something on an agenda, on a vote in the back of the vote, like you did with what the election did with a term limit for board members in this board, a lot of people didn't read the back of the thing, and you didn't educate us. And that's why now you got term limits that trying to disenfranchise. So you're only supporting the new people that are here, pushing away the people that made what the community is now, and you disenfranchising and not helping us. How is that even possible? You have to educate first and teach us first before you give us an exam. Tell us what's an exam. Tell us how to do it in an exam. Work with us together, and then we'll implement it later on to do it. But no, what you're doing is you're trying to teach us real quick. We got May, we got April and June. You got COVID. People going out there thinking what they're gonna do. You got 7 or 8 people. Imagine you got the mayor's race, the council, and now you got to look at a sheet of paper that got all those people that you got to break down. It's hard enough just picking one person. Imagine all those people. You need to do something better than that. Either that or give it up, or people gonna have to start fighting to put it back the way it was, because that doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't at all.
Thank you for your comment. CB7, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Community Board, thank you.
So I think what I'm I'm a supporter of ranked choice voting. I think it is a new system that I think, was implemented. I do have a lot of concerns in terms of the implementation. I think the education piece leaves something to be desired. I think there's some concern in terms of like who's responsible of the education between like the Board of Education, the Board of Elections versus the CFB, and like, Board of Elections is like, well, that's a CFB thing, and vice versa, and that I have like concerns about that. And I think, but also the education component, I think, needs to be like, to Mr. Camacho's point, needs to be really broad, because we're getting really close to the primary, and we have a lot of folks who are really used to circling one person, and now we're asking them to circle multiple and to rank their different candidates. And I think we need to be really creative on how we educate people, and it needs to be more than social media, more than mailers. Like I really would love to see like TV commercials, and I think we really need to be super creative on how we're educating people. And this also includes poll workers, because like I want to make sure like poll workers have all the tools that they need to make sure that they're educating people as they mark their ballot. Yeah, the education needs to be super broad and super deep to make sure that we have all the tools necessary to cast our ballot in June.
Thank you, Julio. CB10 is.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was having trouble unmuting. So I have two really quick questions for you. I mean, I was around in the days of school board. It was one of the first elections that I worked on, and just to echo what my colleagues have said, it was very cumbersome for voters to rank. And I appreciate the education. Community Board 10 is going to be doing outreach. 15% of our population are seniors. I mean, we are really concerned. And my fear is that on election day, you're just going to, you're going to have voters who frankly just don't know what to do. So are poll workers being educated? That's my first question. And my second question is, in elections that have already have gone through ranked choice voting, do you know what percentage of voters actually voted for more than one choice? I mean, have you looked at that data yet?
So I'll try to take that in reverse order. So we do not have from the Board of Elections the kind of the cast vote records that show us that would answer your question with precision. There has been some exit polling done in those two districts in Queens that held ranked choice voting elections. And I think what voters reported is that 60% of voters utilized rankings. So that's not based on ballots. That's based on an exit poll. What we learned from the exit poll is that of the people who didn't rank, 80% of folks who didn't rank said that they didn't rank because they liked only one candidate. So I think as a place to start from, and again, I think we did a good deal of targeted outreach in those districts that had early ranked choice voting elections. You saw, I think, a very good percentage of people using rankings. You had the overwhelming majority of voters say that they found the system easy to use and to understand, upwards of 90%. And most voters who didn't rank said explicitly is because they only liked one candidate. We're doing some additional sort of post-election research in the 2 Bronx districts, so we could learn more about how voters kind of interacted with the system there. I wish we could get more kind of granular data from the Board of Elections that would help us, see precisely how many voters, ranked on their ballots without having to rely on polling, but that's something that we're going to continue to push for.
Okay, thank you for that. Continue. I'm sorry.
Sorry, and just to your first question about poll workers, I know that the poll worker training is incredibly important because that's, that is, again, it's where voters are making the decision, interacting with the ballot. It's the last kind of, for people who are voting in person, is that last kind of human interaction they have before they actually fill it in. It is, they are including information about ranked choice voting in that training. I know it's something that the training generally is something the Board of Elections, I know, is always focusing on and trying to improve. So it's not a piece that we are kind of, actively working with them on, but, we're sharing all the information that we've collected and that we've put together with the Board of Elections. And I'm hopeful that, Board of Elections will have everything they need to ensure the poll workers are able to help voters at the polls.
Okay, we're coming up on time. I'm going to call CB 17. And if there's any final questions for Eric, please raise your hand now.
Thank you.
That includes
Awesome.
the public. Thank you, Joan. Go ahead.
Thank you, my pleasure. Good afternoon, Joan Bachardine, Community Board 17. I do have a quick question regarding the ballot reader. I know there was some concerns, or there was talk about updating the ballot reader, the smart elections conversation that kind of derailed. I think they rejected the update to the ballot reader. Where are we in terms of an application that is capable of reading the updated ballot?
So to my understanding, the issue is not with kind of the ballot scanners or readers themselves, but with the tabulator. The software that does the kind of counting that I kind of walked through. There is a system that the Board of Elections has procured, and they are still waiting on final approval from the State Board of Elections on using that tabulation software. So in those special elections, the districts that have had special elections in Queens, and the count has not yet started in the Bronx, but those counts are being done by hand. They're using the tabulator to kind of check the hand count and make sure that they arrive at the same result. But the official count in those special election districts is being done by hand. I think obviously when you get to June, you can't rely on hand count. You've got to have that software available and certified. And I think everything that I've heard about it is that that's an approval that is going to come in time, but it has not come yet.
And there was a question in the chat about the data, but I believe you said that that is still up in the air. There's a question in chat about where can you find the data?
The data, which data?
Is that, with Christina, would you like to? From Councilmember Lewis' office? Exit polls.
So I can find them, and while
Thank
we're
you.
here, I'll just post a link to the chat so you can see.
Yes, that'd be great if you could post it in the
Yeah.
chat. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
I'll find that and post it.
Wonderful. Do you have any questions from the public before we close out this item? Okay, we do not. So Eric Friedman, I'd like to thank you for joining the board tonight, answering these questions. We look forward to seeing you out in the community.
I thank you for the opportunity, and again, I'll just one more just pitch. If this is a system that's coming, we appreciate all the help we can get. All of you have your own constituencies and your own communities, and we would love to come and talk more about ranked choice voting with any and all of you.
Wonderful. And did you give me a copy of your presentation? Correct, you did, right?
I will send it along to you.
And now,
as soon
okay.
as we're done. Yep.
All right, not a problem. And you could share that link in the chat. So
will.
that concludes our business with the campaign finance board. Eric Friedman, thank you for joining us. With that being said, members, we move on to our next agenda item. Is there any new business to discuss? Any concerns, new business? Any unfinished business? Nope. Unfinished business to make note. We are in community board season reappointment process. We're in it. Make sure that you submit your attendance sheets. There are a couple of boards. You're going to get a call from me tomorrow. That I'm not gonna say you are. Just make sure you get those attendance sheets in. We want to make sure everything is looking good. The council members, they have their paperwork. So we look forward to a wonderful process and also having a virtual ceremony to welcome the members in June. With that being said,
jump in.
oh, yes.
Let me jump in, Savannah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to speak on that. This is it for the BP. So if you don't have your stuff in, please get it in. This is it for us. And we are really making an effort to close out on a high note. We had really good conversations with the council members. This is it for a lot of them as well. So they're really trying to get their stuff in timely so we could, put this behind us and we could just move on effectively and in a good place. Many of you we know, and many of you have been around for a while, and we love you guys. We will miss you. And whoever the new VP is and their team is, we trust that you will embrace them. I always talk about Teresa Scavo and the way she embraced me when I actually took over doing the borough boards after Andrew went. So I would hope that you all would follow that model. And the way you've been with Savannah, because I've been crazy busy, and Savannah has just jumped in and really done an awesome job with this, and the rest of our team as well. So you guys have been stellar. I'm prayerful that we can be in person before our last and final borough board meeting, because I would love, yes, Joan, I'm clapping too. I would love to see some of you and know that you're all well. So I came today. I was excited to be here. I didn't look on the agenda. I didn't realize that it was going to be ranked choice voting and I was going to get rankled about it. But, I'm glad at least some education was shared, and I'm hopeful that you will take back the information, and it's just good to see you. I scrolled and I got to see all of you, and those of you who I don't know, I hope to get to know you before this is all over. So I'm signing out, and I just wanted to say thank you always. And Savannah, Michelle, I don't know if Hercules is on, Karen, Grant, thank you. Is that my brother Camacho? All right, Camacho, Flat Toe, all my faces. Look at all my faces. Janine is hiding herself. Oh, I see my girl over there. Gail, yes. So I see my people. I love all of you. So I hope to see you soon. Blessings.
So with that said, at 6:01, can we get a motion to adjourn?
Joan
I have a question,
moves.
Sarah.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
My hand up.
Oh,
Teresa Scavo, CB 15 seconds adjournment.
I have a
It's
question,
17,
Sarah.
You need to get it
Take it.
first.
Wait. Somebody has a question.
We'll take the, yes.
Yeah, I had my hand up.
I'm sorry.
Are you acknowledging me now, Sarah?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I have a question. I get a lot of questions about term limits for the board members. And we don't have clarification on the term limits for the board members. So we need to have some clarification, because we're supposed to be term limited, but we don't have clarification on it.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that you have it, but I'm certain that information was provided the same way it was provided to us. I believe that term limit starts this year. All right. It starts effective this year when people are being placed on the board. I believe is this year. So we'll send it out so that we'll send it out again.
So
I thought it started 2 years ago. I thought it started. No.
Yes,
we need clarification. I need
No,
clarification.
it's not 2 years ago. So we'll send it out.
Thank you so much.
also-
Be blessed, Ingrid. It was a pleasure working with you, and I wish you the best.
Thank
and I
you.
know we'll meet again.
We are. I'm coming back on. You're not rid of me yet.
I know, but you act like you leaving. We got 2 more months, but we just want to get it said in case I'm not here to say it.
Thank you. I love you too. You already know. CB1, you already know is in the house.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Moved by Joan, CB17, second by Teresa. That's correct?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn? Yes. All those
Yes.
in favor?
Motion move to adjourn. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All those in favor? Oh, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you so much. We will see you guys next month, May 4th at 4 p.m. via WebEx for our next board meeting. Have a wonderful week and enjoy the spring weather.
Thank you.
Good night,
Indeed, you do the
everybody.
same. Take care, everyone.
Take care.